Israeli forces set their sights on Gaza City, as the country's politicians dismiss the growing consensus that what they are inflicting on Palestinians is a clear-cut case of genocide. Targeting journalists with bombs and bullets is not enough for Israeli leaders, who are now pumping even more propaganda into the mix. Plus, our earthly reality that seems more and more like science fiction, and the tech bros working to take us there. This past week, Israel was accused yet again of conducting a genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. More than 100 of the world's leading experts on war crimes added their names to the list of human rights groups and academics who had already drawn that same conclusion. And yet again, Israel dismissed the finding, calling it Hamas-driven, and carried on with its ethnic cleansing of the Strip. Gaza City, where nearly 1 million Palestinians are packed in, is in the midst of being leveled. Journalists are still getting killed, targeted by Israelis, some while working for Western news organizations, one of which, Reuters, actually succumbed to Israeli propaganda even as it reported on the death of its own cameraman. As Gaza is reduced to rubble and the Israeli narrative collapses under the weight of its own contradictions, this story is further shredding the credibility of news sources that people used to believe in. Trust that, like the wasteland that is Gaza, will be challenging, if not impossible, to rebuild. The Israeli military's offensive in Gaza City, the largest Palestinian population center of them all, bears the hallmarks of an endgame. The official Israeli narrative: the city is one of Hamas's last remaining strongholds, and Israel must, quote, defeat the enemy. The real objective: to seize Gaza City, level its neighborhoods one by one, blowing them up, bulldozing them into rubble, force out the roughly 1 million people who live there, and spin the story in ways that make no sense.
במעוזים האחרונים שנותרו בידי החמאס, ובראשם בירת הטרור בעיר עזה.
Through messaging that has grown less disciplined and much less effective.
You basically see a schizophrenic Israeli campaign when it comes to propaganda messaging. They are trying to say that Gaza City is the remaining stronghold of Hamas.
Israel's Security Cabinet instructed the IDF to dismantle the 2 remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza City and the central camps.
But Israel said the exact same thing about Rafah. They said it about Khan Yunis. They said it about Gaza City before, when they invaded it at least 3 to 4 times. And you're seeing Israeli generals saying this is not true. This is not going to defeat Hamas.
אני מוצא בתוכנית הזאת מספר בעיות ופערים.
Israeli ministers as well stating it. In Hebrew, the message is more clear and honest. It's very straightforward.
The big issue is that hardly anybody in the outside world continues to believe the Israelis. Certainly, normal Western publics have given up entirely on the Israeli narrative. The people who still cling to the narrative are the US government, for example, a few other governments in the West. But these justifications, they fall on deaf ears because they are unbelievable in every possible sense of that term. And the Israelis, of course, they have a different story that they circulate inside their own society, in their media, which is also all about, we have to find what they call the hostages, in fact, prisoners. But of course, materially, what they are engaged in is the destruction of an entire society, and that, of course, is the point.
International pressure is starting to get inside, where we're hearing more and more of incidents where Israelis are kicked out of hotels abroad, where when they sign in with an Israeli passport, people say, we don't want to have you here. So people say, we don't want anything to do with you because of what your country is doing. So Israelis are feeling more and more cornered by international pressure, but internally there's no accountability at all.
One angle keeps surfacing in the coverage of Gaza, typically when confrontations occur between Prime Minister Netanyahu and his subordinates on what Israel should do next.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's new war plan has come under fire from some of the Israel Defense Forces' top brass.
It's the idea that this is Benjamin Netanyahu's genocide, not Israel's. as if citizens of the Middle East's self-declared only democracy should be spared any blame for the war crimes committed in their name, that they are somehow powerless to change Israel's course politically. Anti-war protests there have grown in size, but polls consistently show the vast majority of Israelis still support what their military is inflicting on the people of Gaza. So that narrative that this is all Netanyahu's doing is simply inaccurate, and it distracts attention away from what underpins this genocide, which, when you boil it down, is ethno-nationalism and racial supremacy.
The depiction of the Israeli genocidal project in Gaza as Netanyahu's alone, it serves several different functions. One is to give cover to Israeli society itself. Poll after poll after poll have shown that Israeli Jewish society overwhelmingly supports what the army is doing in Gaza.
אז אני רוצה להגיד תודה לחיילים שלנו שפוצצתם את הבית חולים. ככה עושים, ככה נלחמים.
The majority of Jewish Israelis, for example, want to maintain the suspension of humanitarian aid into Gaza. What Israeli society wants is what Israeli society has always wanted, which is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. That's the premise on which the State of Israel was founded. There's nothing new there. But by focusing on Netanyahu, it's as though we can remove the symptom from the cause.
It suits Western audiences, whether that's the media, whether that's institutions of accountability like think tanks, to find a boogeyman, a kind of scapegoat to deal with an unpalatable reality, which is that the majority of Israeli society has become incredibly genocidal, racist in their rhetoric, in their politics.
ואם כבר ישראל מחליטה לחסל את העיתונאים, אז עדיף מאוחר מאשר אף פעם לא.
It's also very self-serving for many of these institutions in the West to delude themselves into thinking that there is still a salvageable segment of Israeli society that they can still speak to.
There's only one real group in Israel that wants this, and that's the hardline, right-wing coalition partners of Benjamin Netanyahu.
But unfortunately, that segment no longer exists, and that's something that a lot of Western institutions, whether that's medias or others, have really failed to grapple with.
Throughout Israel's relentless targeting of Palestinian journalists in Gaza, Western news outlets have repeatedly failed to stand up for the victims, their supposed colleagues. Reuters recently took that a step further. When Hussam al-Masri, a camera operator the agency had hired, and 4 other journalists at the Nasser hospital were killed in an Israeli attack, while al-Masri was live streaming video from the hospital roof.
According to our initial inquiry, there was a Hamas camera. We were tracking it, we cross-referenced it with intelligence, and then we executed a strike against it.
When Israeli spokesmen, already notorious for lying about attacks on journalists, called the source of that live feed a Hamas camera, Reuters rolled over and used that characterization in its own coverage of the attack, language it would later change.
It's the very essence of Israel's genocide in Gaza to go after every single hospital, every single journalist there. And he was bombed for setting up a Reuters camera for live streaming. Reuters knew it was their own camera that is set up there. Reuters didn't even have the courage to say that they bombed our own camera on that rooftop. So the complicity is staggering. It's unprecedented. I've never seen anything like this.
Israel is committing
Genocide in Gaza.
Committing genocide in Gaza.
genocide in Gaza.
Western media outlets had to confront reality this past week, when more than 100 of the world's foremost experts on genocide called the assault on Gaza what it is.
There's certainly a growing chorus of voices across the spectrum who are saying that what Israel is carrying out in Gaza is not simply a war, but is also a genocide.
Those scholars have finally caught up with what Palestinians have been saying from the start, and what so many others concluded long ago. Bodies like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Israeli rights organization B'Tselem, as well as Israeli scholars. The response from Israeli officials to the statement had a familiar ring to it, that it was, quote, entirely based on Hamas's campaign of lies.
It's the strongest case for genocide in modern history. The denial of it only disgraces and discredits its protagonists. If you see someone saying the Rwanda genocide never happened, or the genocide against the Rohingya never happened, they would be immediately disqualified from the mainstream media, from the public debate, basically.
That's a lie. There is no genocide in Gaza.
But the denial of the genocide in Gaza is still being treated with acceptance, that if you deny the genocide, you increase your chances of being platformed.
So when there is a tribunal and the generals and the leaders that have been orchestrating the genocide will pay the price for it, I think a lot of journalists should be there with them.
האספסוף העזתי, את כל אותם במרכאות בלתי מעורבים, תתי אדם, החלאות, באמת חסרי זכות קיום, הכל שם, רק הוא.
The media has basically been creating the ground on which the genocide can continue.
מגיע לאנשים האלה שם מוות, מוות קשה, מוות בייסורים, אין שם חפים מפשע ברצועת עזה.
When reckoning comes, a lot of people should be charged with complicity, and media outlets should also pay the price.
As we just reported, there is nowhere near enough outrage on Western news outlets over Israel's never-ending slaughter of Palestinian journalists. That has not stopped Israel, however, from ramping up its Hasbara campaign, and this past week it launched a new propaganda push targeting reporters in Gaza. Tarek Nafa has been on this story.
Throughout the genocide, Israeli officials have followed a pattern of smearing Palestinian journalists both before and after their killings.
Many journalists who have reported from Gaza, so-called journalists, are simply terrorists with a press vest on.
Despite condemnations from governments and press freedom groups, the Israelis are doubling down. This past week, Israel's Minister for Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism, Amichai Shikli, launched a new project that claims to, quote, uncover the hidden ties between journalists and Hamas. The website MediaWatch.legal uses social media to allege Hamas affiliation through a tangled web of mutual friends and names mentioned in Facebook posts. Initially, the site was pretty sloppy. It contained multiple typos and misidentified journalists with incorrect photos. Those errors may have something to do with the fact that the website was produced using AI. The firm behind it is AI-powered data analytics firm Penlink, which has a long history of working with US law enforcement. At one point, Penlink received a $20 million US government contract to surveil American internet users. Despite its shady background, the new site has been shared widely in pro-Israel circles. The messaging and the graphics bear striking similarities to other pro-Israel doxing websites like Canary Mission and UN Watch, which give off a veneer of legitimacy, but which are really propaganda outfits. Like those sites, Media Watch encourages users to report so-called fake journalists. This is just the latest effort in a years-long campaign by Israel to tarnish Palestinian journalists. Such campaigns are sometimes noted for being slick and heavily funded. This one feels a bit amateurish, and whoever's behind it seems to understand that too. The last time we checked, the website had been taken down for maintenance.
Thanks, Tarek. Machines with an intelligence that seems human. Algorithms that know what's coming and predict our behavior. Earthlings ticketed for life in outer space. A few decades ago, this was the stuff of science fiction. Now, it's reality. And behind that reality is a clique of big tech titans, names like Musk, Zuckerberg, Thiel and Altman. Men who have been steeped in sci-fi. Books like Snow Crash and Starship Troopers, films like Ready Player One and Her, TV series like Star Trek. Those imagined tech futures tend to come with a dystopian side, the excesses and oppressions of machine culture. But to tech entrepreneurs, warnings about the dangers of imaginary utopias are overblown. Either that, or they are perfectly aware of the worlds they are building. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on the tech titans who say they want to make life better, but are taking their cues from some of the bleakest futures sci-fi has to offer.
These are some of the most powerful men on Earth.
First live demo in VR.
Leaders of corporations worth trillions of dollars. Innovators who have changed how much of the world lives. Nothing gets them as excited as new tech.
Oh my God!
and the possibility of making science fiction into science reality.
I think science fiction's always been an influence on people working in technology, especially in Silicon Valley. As a science fiction writer, if I ever meet anybody from those industries, they're always instantly interested.
It's always the science fiction guys. They think of everything first, and the builders come along and they make it happen.
A lot of major founders and CEOs have talked pretty extensively about their own love of science fiction.
Yeah, I think like sci-fi movies, video games can be pretty inspiring and thought-provoking about what are some like impossible sounding technologies that maybe could work somehow.
Elon Musk talks a lot about loving the Scottish sci-fi writer Ian M. Banks's Culture series. Jeff Bezos of Amazon is, in addition to being a huge Lord of the Rings fan, is also a big fan of the Culture. Sam Altman of OpenAI has been talking a lot about the Spike Jonze movie Her, starring Scarlett Johansson as an AI.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Samantha.
The number of things that I think Her got right, this idea that it is going to be this like conversational language interface, that was incredibly prophetic and certainly more than a little bit inspired us.
The tech titans have drawn on many different ideas from science fiction, and they range from the imaginative to the grotesque.
We will take materials from the moon and from near-Earth objects, and we'll build giant colonies, and people will live in those.
Science fiction itself as a genre is not just about the technology, it's about the kind of implications for society. But I think the kind of way in which tech titans take it is that they take all the shiny technology part of it and they ignore the social, political, and economic implications of those.
The tech bros who wield so much influence over our lives wouldn't be the first to have misinterpreted, misunderstood, or just missed the ethical lessons in the literature and films they consume. However, given their intelligence and the caliber of their teams, what they're doing seems to go beyond a simple misreading of sci-fi. Follow them closely and a pattern emerges of cherry-picking cool concepts, ideas that can become products, innovations that stretch the limits of science and even necessity, and if it all works out, can make them a whole lot of money.
I love science fiction. I mean, I have spent a lot of time reading that.
One example of this kind of ethically dismissive sci-fi fascination is demonstrated by Mark Zuckerberg, creator of Facebook, CEO of social media behemoth Meta.
Are there any books in particular, writers in particular?
There's some that are just classics around this, right? So I think at this point, anyone who's interested in this space would read Ready Player One and Snow Crash.
Snow Crash.
I think Zuckerberg's relationship to Snow Crash is harder for me to understand precisely because Snow Crash is very much a dystopian satire.
It's super powerful, and it is sort of the science fiction future that I think we all hope to get to.
It's very interesting to me that Zuckerberg has sort of latched onto it as a vision of a future that he wants to bring about.
An embodied internet where you're in the experience, not just looking at it. And we call this the metaverse.
I wouldn't be so rude as to suggest that Zuckerberg hasn't read the book, but I think this is an example of something where he's seen a framework, an idea of a kind of full virtual reality cyberspace that you can travel to and within.
Hey, are you coming?
Yeah, just gotta find something to wear.
All right, perfect.
Boy.
Oh, hey, Mark. Hey, what's going on?
Hi.
I think what's really interesting about a lot of the Silicon Valley CEOs, people like Elon or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, these guys aren't really engineers or innovators anymore. They're just money men.
I was an AI nerd my whole life. I watched sci-fi shows growing up, and I always thought it would be really cool if someday somebody built it.
Sam Altman's a perfect example of this. He's not an AI programmer. He's not worked in that field himself as an engineer. So it's easier for them to become vision guys, selling themselves as an innovative brand or someone that sees the future. And science fiction allows them to do that.
There's a palpable thrill for many tech entrepreneurs when something jumps out of the pages of a sci-fi book or an episode of a futuristic TV series into the realm of the possible. There's Elon Musk's neurotechnology company, Neuralink.
Neuralink, an experimental brain-computer interface that allows patients to control technology with their mind.
Jeff Bezos, once best known as the founder of Amazon, is now also known as the man behind space technology company Blue Origin. His ambition isn't just commercial space travel. He is looking at human colonies in outer space.
Was the idea of manufactured worlds. These are very large structures, miles on end, and they hold 1 million people or more each. This is a very different kind of space colony.
On many levels, these tech titans seem to be playing God. Probe them, though, and they'd insist they're merely pushing humanity's limits so that certain people, the rich, ambitious, intelligent, can become more like God.
Yeah, transhumanism. You know, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body.
These fantasy goals are the product of a pretty extreme set of ideologies that many tech bros and sci-fi geeks adopt. They've been summarized in an academic paper into a neat acronym: TESCREAL, transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. It's a lot of words to Google. In short, these are a set of notions that reinforce the need to build tech-enhanced humans, people with faster brains, who biohack their bodies to perform with minimal sleep, for instance, and who do things like build colonies in space so that the longevity of humankind is ensured.
There's likely to be another Dark Ages, particularly if there's a Third World War. Then we want to make sure that there's enough of us to bring civilization back. I think that's why it's important to get a self-sustaining base, ideally on Mars.
It would be easy to dismiss these as fringe delusions of wealthy, eccentric Western tech bros. But this tight clique of ultra-rich businessmen control some of the most significant technologies used around the world, and they also have a lot of influence with the most powerful and the most dangerously eccentric man on Earth.
There's a notion that we can get to a world we want through techno-solutionism. Technology is the solution in these minds. If we just build this thing correctly, then we can solve political and social problems.
So there's a meme about the torment nexus, which is the idea that a science fiction author has written a book where there's a terrible, torturous technology called the torment nexus. And then the next thing is tech CEOs announced that they've invented the torment nexus. It's kind of like disturbingly accurate these days.
A bunch of people have read books that are quite clearly and explicitly warning against a particular kind of technology and taking from it the idea that they should, in fact, create that technology. And I think AI is an interesting thing to talk about here because on one level, many people who even work in the AI industry believe that they are creating a technology with the power to destroy the world, and yet for some reason continue to work on it.
If you have this incredible new technology, you can maybe get much closer to the kind of computer that exists in sci-fi.
Tech giants see no downside, but that's not how sci-fi works. Sci-fi works as saying you've changed something fundamental about the society. What happens to the entire world around this? Who is harmed and who's losing? And I think the tech titans really don't think about that at all. They only think about this as an unlimited upside, and that's a huge issue.
And finally, the carefully orchestrated political theater coming out of China. This past week, Xi Jinping presided over one of the country's biggest ever military parades. It was a lavish show marking the 80th anniversary of China's Second World War victory over Japan. Xi boasted that the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is unstoppable, while he was flanked by the leaders of Russia and North Korea. If the intention was to spook the administration in Washington, that seems to have worked. Donald Trump posted a message to President Xi saying, "Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America." The message that Beijing was sending, that Trump was reacting to, the center of global power is shifting. The era of U.S. hegemony is coming to an end. And here at the Listening Post, we'll stay on that story to see how it plays out.